You're listening to the Voiceover Casting Corner, a podcast and question and answer session recorded live every month. VCC is brought to you by the Voicecaster. The Voicecaster casts thousands of voices every year across all genres, and we're excited to give you an inside look at the casting process direct from our casting team.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Voiceover Casting Corner. We have a special episode. So we're doing an extra one for you guys for the month of August. We wanted to hop on live and talk about accents. We've been getting a lot of questions about accents. We have an amazing workshop on accents with the amazing accent man, Andrew Frankel, who is joining us today. And of course, you have myself and Catherine. And yeah, we're going to talk all things accents, answer any questions that you guys have. We've had a few questions come in already for people who wouldn't be able to make it live but can catch the replay. So we just want to make sure we can run through, answer any questions you guys have. And then also we're going to tell you about the 6-week workshop that we have coming up very soon, which is in studio, which is exciting. I know everybody is constantly asking about, when are you guys going to have classes in studio again? Well, now it's
here you go.
We're back.
There's always a different energy when you get in the studio with a group of people. So if you can do it, do it. It's a lot different than the Zoom virtual world that we've been living on. So right. It's like we all need to have be in
human connection.
We need to have connection. Voiceover is just so naturally isolating when you're in your booth all day by yourself anyway, that it's so nice to get out and meet people and work with people, and it's a totally different energy.
Not just to get like the energy, but like you get information about what other people's approaches are, and you consider things from all these different perspectives that you never would have, and you see it in real time, and you see the way you can feel the vibe in the room where someone's like, that was interesting, or I didn't love that, and you learn just by really being there. And I used to take all the weekly workshop with you guys all the time. I learned so much just sitting there listening to like the same script 15 times, but 15 completely different approaches.
Exactly.
There's something to be said for sure about that group setting and everybody working on the same things or different things. It's like even if everybody has a different script, there is still so much you can learn from every single person in that room, whether it's an idea that you've never thought of before, or like, okay, that doesn't quite work. So I'm going to make a mental note of that so that I don't do that and make that same mistake.
Or even just hearing how people get redirected too. It can give you ideas. Yeah.
Totally. You hear a note that you would never get and you go, do I do that? Do I not do that?
Right.
And should I? Like it's other people are one of the greatest resources we have. That's that's really even the whole idea of accents, is like you have access to a completely different mentality and just even a different approach to a sentence that comes from somebody who comes from a different place.
That's true.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, think about all the different accents that you just hear in everyday life, when you're at the grocery store, or, wherever else. It's like, it's so fun to hear all of that, because it's like you're hearing a different emphasis, and like, they say things differently, and sometimes that can bring a different kind of meaning to it, and it works, things that you would never think of.
Not just meaning, but like sometimes it betrays little things about their past, and you go, they come from this point of the world, this part of the world, where their conception of this is this, and you're able to just have a completely different appreciation for being an outsider, or really just looking at something from a different perspective. And I think beyond just the sound of sounding different, the acting exercises to get out of your skin and put on somebody else's.
Yeah. And that's incredible. And it's like you can hear the people who do it, and it just feels so effortless. It's like they just embody that, and that's always incredible.
Yeah, that's that's the magic.
It's not something I personally can do, and it's always so fun to hear people basically become another person.
Yeah. Well, I always say, like, I think everybody can learn, everybody can do it. And I don't like, even the idea that I'm the accent man is not at all what I'm trying to communicate. It's that everybody has the potential to be an accent man. And that is somebody who's ready to be anything behind the microphone and to be able to supply a director or casting director with a lot of different options and not to be an expert on 600 different regions in the world, but to go, I could make this a little more upper crust, or I could take this south, or to have a sense of geography and history and physics to know how all those things come together to create something unique and just different. Because often we're asked to be more than one person behind the microphone.
And that's, I mean, honestly, like that's exactly what everybody is raving about with your class is the fact that you go into all of that. It's not just, do round this A out a little bit more or do,
No,
it's like you're not doing those sorts of things. You're taking it from a different approach that really helps people actually learn it and embody it, and that's been what everybody's raving about. All I've been
that's good.
told are great things about,
And
how
I
you
feel like
approach it.
that's a way you're going to remember it too. Is that you're not just learning, phonetics or stuff like that, but you're learning the history behind things, and that's what's going to help you stick. It's going to stick in your brain. It's going to really connect, and
It makes
that's
the
how you're going to remember to
performance
do it later.
informed.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's because at the end of the day, bad accents are it's bad acting.
Right.
And good acting takes work and it takes
Hmm.
research and knowledge that you can exercise. It's not just the factual knowledge, but it's okay. The factual knowledge is, that's your artillery, but you still need to be able to like have it do things. You got to be able to shoot that gun and have it go, yeah, performs a function.
Yep, exactly. Good. Should we get into answering a few questions? Catherine, do you want to let us
The
know what
one
the
that we
first?
got in from someone who couldn't be here today, she's Canadian,
Mm.
and she said, "I can't hear my Canadian accent. Are there any tips to get my American pronunciation to come more naturally?" So
Yeah,
what do
I
you
think
do
she
if you've got
mentioned
an
like
accent, you can't quite hear it? How do you know that you're going more
Yeah.
neutral
like
with
the
your accent?
words about and the
Yeah.
the most common,
Well, so
sounds.
question number one is what part of Canada? If she's not hearing it, then we're guessing probably Toronto,
Mm.
um, something urban, something that doesn't because we find that in metropolitan areas, everybody tries to sound similar. And so you can get something that sounds very neutral. And that goes for every country.
Sure.
That being close to America is going to have a lot of crossover, but we hear things like process. Down here, we'll say process. About. It's that
Yeah.
sort of the jaw movement, and also there's this thing called the Canadian rise, which is something where they'll have upspeak in the middle of a sentence where we go, are we agreeing to have this sentence? And then they bring it back down at the end of the sentence. So these are things that are sort of outside the accent itself, but they're mannerisms and pronunciations that are a dead giveaway. So listen to the cadence of Americans is the first thing I would say, and find actors that you like how they speak. Often what you're seeing on camera isn't going to be how people generally talk, and there's a big distinction between authentic versus authentic for the screen or
Yes.
authentic for radio. But if you just want to if it's sticking in people's craw and they're going, I don't know if you're actually American, then you want to have some kind of reference to somebody who sounds neutral. And it might be more in your cadence than in the accent
Mhm.
itself.
Excellent answer. Thank you.
Alright. So yeah, another common question we get a lot is people think of accents, that's something you're going to use a lot in animation, different British characters, Russian characters, things like that. But where else in voiceover do being able to do accents come in handy?
I mean, I if I get an audition for anything in an accent and it's nature narration and we're going to do something quiet. You know, if you can sell it, do it. Go for it. But it's in narration, it's in commercials. I've There's been a lot of people asking for Hawaiian accents just this year.
Mhm.
Generally, if you're going for that, they want something authentic, but try it. See, there's videos online where you can learn these things. People do accent tags. The ones that always come up for video games, for there's been one video game in particular, it's been all rural South
Mm.
characters that they want. And then recently, they've been throwing out lower class UK and Austrian, and you never know where somebody's going to need just a particular sound. And while it would be great, I did some looping actually for a World War II film, and they needed German accents. So they got a
Mhm.
bunch of people with German accents, but they also got two German, speakers
Right.
who weren't actors. And the thing is, you got a mishmash of people who kind of knew what they were doing with the accent. You had these two very authentic accents, but they couldn't necessarily do the scene. So
Right.
if you again, the acting always comes first. The
Mhm.
accent is a layer you put on top of it. But endless. I mean, people want accents everywhere.
Well, kind of then merging into this, my next question here. If I'm not authentic to a certain accent, let's say I'm American, but this audition I got is for a British voice. Is it okay to put one on for commercials specifically?
For commercial specifically, the question here, first of all, yeah, it's okay to go for it. If somebody's giving you the audition, if your agent, if somebody's casting and saying, "Hey, here's an opportunity," I'm always going to tell you, go for it. Go for it. If somebody thinks you can do it, that's a vote of confidence in your favor. So, yeah, your personal question about can I do this? It's really, are you believable?
Mhm.
And like what I was saying before, your voice, your normal speaking voice, it betrays all kinds of things about your life story. It is your life story in a lot of ways. If you can change the story so that you understand why you're pronouncing this certain way, and you understand, like you've done the research, they pronounce certain words literally just differently. It's not just the
Mhm.
accent, the pronunciation is different. You've actually done the work to say, I am this other person as far as my relationship with this microphone goes. And if nothing gets betrayed, if you're not making a mockery of it,
Right.
then yeah,
Yeah.
go for it. But I think the key point of acting is a level of empathy to say, yeah, I'm not going to be me because me here is me here. The script calls for this story and for this person, and I'm going to do my best to understand so that I can present something that feels authentic. That's the name of the game. That's acting.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. And I will add to that too, that it's also like you're gonna find in commercials specifically, you're also gonna find the caricatures, that are
Yes.
a little bit bigger, not necessarily authentic, but it's like the
And by
Shamrock
the
Shake
way,
from McDonald's might just be like
Right. The
your best
Lucky Charms
leprechaun,
leprechaun. Yes.
I I don't shy away from caricature at all. I think it's a
Mhm.
really, like we talked about, like doing the character detour in an audition where it's like let's read through it, but let's put on a character. Let's do something silly. And you go, well, that actually brought something interesting to the read that
Mhm.
wouldn't normally do that. My
Yeah.
thing is similar where I go, the caricature exists because it's the most base, like easy to grasp understanding of that whatever, of that region, of that country. If that's it's a great place to start, but it's not a performance. So it's stretching to the absurd. And then it's okay, now that we've seen how far you can stretch, dial it back and let's see if we can find the actual person in there.
Yeah, and that's great. I mean, it's just like anything. It's like there's going to be times where it's a bigger, more caricature. It doesn't have to be maybe as authentic, and then there's going to be times where it's like
Mhm.
we're looking for that
So,
authenticity. So
but
yeah,
sometimes
it's
they
like
do want the caricature, and you got to be ready for that too.
Yeah,
yes. Yep. Yep.
exactly.
And from the casting side, it's so funny because there are times when it's like we'll be casting, let's say, a British voice. And so it's like, okay, I'm gonna submit 15 people. 14 are gonna be authentic Brits, maybe 13, and a couple are gonna be my Americans who
Yep.
do believable British accents, right? And I will tell you that first of all, it kind of depends on who's listening as well. So
Mhm.
if all Americans are casting, I would say 9.5 times out of 10, they are going to go with one of the Americans.
Yep. I think there's an American perception of a British accent that is like, "Oh, well,
Mhm.
they're informed, they're intelligent, they're better than me." And
Yes.
the thing is, when you just are authentically British, you don't necessarily play into what the American perception is.
The
So if you're
posh.
selling the American perception to Americans, that actually makes sense why that
Yeah,
would happen.
Mhm. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So it's always fun to see who they end up going with if they go with somebody who's native,
Yeah.
to wherever we're casting the accent from or not. So
When people ask you for British, do they ever specify what kind of British? And do you notice,
some
like, what gets cast more?
sometimes they do, especially if it's like super specific.
Mhm.
But most of the time they don't. It's just like they're just like British and it's like okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think that is part of the reason why they're not casting the authentic voices, the people who are from there, because they have
Yep.
regionalisms just like we do.
Yep.
And so I
So
think
many.
sometimes it's just one of those things where, and some of their regionalisms, like the Geordie dialect is like one of those where like they'll be specific if they're looking for that.
Yeah.
But otherwise it's like it's so all over the place that
It
it's
is,
like some of them
and
will be
to
like, oh, but are they actually British? I'm like, yes, they are. They're from
They're
wherever.
authentically British.
yeah,
Like I have to prove it to them because they're hearing a British dialect that they're not used to hearing because it's
Mhm.
a specific regionalism.
and that's something that I run into a lot where I'll get specs for an accent that are so vague, or you'll read the specs that say this type of accent, and then you'll read the script which kind of has the accent written into it and go, these are at odds. They're saying upper class British. This is written like somebody from Essex, okay? Like, am I going to and you there's ways to like negotiate, like maybe I'll do the pronunciations with this attitude. And there's a lot of tools to make it work, but it behooves you to know what the truth is and what the actual accents are, because sometimes the casting people don't know. Sometimes the
Mhm.
directors misspeak, or like they write something that they have a misconception about. The more knowledge you have, the better armed you are for any audition.
Yeah, adapting that versatility and yeah.
I've got one last question on my list here, and that's if an accent isn't specified in a spec, is it okay to put one on?
Well, it really depends on the audition.
This probably depends a lot on who's listening and what it's for.
On who's listening,
Yeah.
yeah, on literally every possible variable that could enter into that equation changes the
Good
answer.
question.
Yeah.
But I will say, like, because and we don't just talk about accents in the class. Sometimes it's affectations, or cadence, adding a lilt, coming off as like a little more personable. Somebody who employs a lilt all the time, but it's not necessarily an accent. It's Barack Obama. He'll roll up his sleeves, do something kind of like that. And there's a "Hello."
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's not when he's, "Can you pass the milk?" It's when he's talking to somebody, when he's talking to a crowd. Is he putting it on? I think so. But it's like when he's at home and he's like, sitting down and he's like, "Hey, just pass the remote. I'm tired. I've had a long day." He's probably not presenting the thoughts in that particular
Yeah.
way. So, we're always showing a different side of who we are in an audition. If they're asking for being authentic, well, there's authentic me getting run over by a train, and that's gonna be in an animation audition where I like, "Here's what that sounds like." Then there's authentic me talking to you, candlelit dinner, and we're just kinda, enjoying each other's company, and this is actually who I am. That's as much changing your voice as putting on an accent or an affectation or something. If you're reading the script, don't even look at the specs. Look at the script and go, are they kind of implying that this truck commercial is for people who would relate to somebody from the South? Maybe
Mhm.
I'll lean into my R's a little bit harder and do something like that. And then that's the thing. It's not an on or off switch. It's a dimmer. You can
Mhm.
lean into something. You can south it up. You can Bronx it up. You can Venice it out a little bit. There's shades of gray in all of these.
That's great.
Yeah.
Very nice answer. I like that. Yeah.
That's
Thank you.
yeah, that's great. Because yeah, you're right. It's not black and white. Like there's just so many different things you can do. And on our side with the casting, it's like sometimes it's like, why did they choose that accent? Or,
Yeah.
and it's like, okay, that kind of came out of left field. So like you're absolutely right, where it has to be authentic, it has to make sense, but it's more than just thinking of it as, okay, on this one, I'm going to do a different accent just to
Just
do a different
cause.
Because I
accent.
Just cause.
I mean, it all comes back to it. It's like I can't even count the number of times just in the last 20 minutes or whatever that we've said authentic,
Mhm.
because that's what it comes down to.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
all about the authenticity, that connection.
And
So,
I wanna stress, authenticity is not I am being exactly what I am. It's I have done the thinking. I've considered this, and I'm trying to portray this to the best of my knowledge. That's authentic.
all right. That's it for our questions, right, Catherine?
Yeah, that we had prepared.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Looks like we got a
All
couple
right.
in the chat here.
So, yeah, we have a couple in the chat we'll pull up here. Stacy says, how many accents are there in the world?
Give me an exact number, Andrew.
It's funny because we talk about similects. You know what those are?
Explain
So
it to the viewers.
there's accents, and accents are, regionalisms and ways that people will pronounce or speak in large regions. Dialects have more to do with how people will speak, and some people make the distinction there that, like, in cities, like Liverpool is going to sound different from Essex, is going to sound different from London. Similects are like when I talked about having a twin sister and being like, yeah, my family, we all kind of do this weird lilty thing where we're up, we're down, we present things, and then we like, or you have a group of friends or frat guys who like all end up talking the same way and there's little bubbles of them where like the frat guys at this school talk like the frat guys at that school because they meet up and they have group chats. And like, even online, there are like subreddits where you need to learn the language of every single of this particular subreddit. Everybody remembers Diamond Hands and Hodl and all these things from 2021 when the Wall Street bets thing was like, these are just one of the words, I'm losing it. These are communities that are forming their own similex. They're deciding this is how we talk. Or the group of girls in high school that you knew that they talk like that for some reason. It's how we relate to each other. So is there a number? No, it's infinite, and we're building them every day.
The possibilities are endless, right?
Endless. And listen to everybody because they're giving you gold in terms of like, here's a different way to approach a sentence, and it's really is a window into everybody's mind.
Yeah, I love that. All right. And Herb had a question. Besides through an agent, how can I find out about auditions calling for accents I do?
How can you find out about auditions? Well,
Yeah.
I don't know where you are in your career, but specs will always tell you if you're doing online, like casting sites, they'll say what accents they want. And really, it's the specs of any audition, wherever that's coming from. If that's coming from a casting site or a pay-to-play site or through an agent, wherever. The specs are gonna let you know. But on the flip side, let people know you do accents. If that's a separate reel that you have of things that you do, if somebody says, hey, do you do accents? Just be ready to be like, yeah, here's a bunch.
And be ready to do them
Yes.
instantly.
Yeah.
You can't have to have time to get into it. It's
let
like
me
if it's
research this a
listed
bit.
somewhere, you better be able to get right into it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, I would also just add to that. It's the audition anywhere auditions come from.
Yeah.
Could be accented auditions.
Yep.
So it's pretty much anywhere you're going to get auditions from. Susie said, which accents are most marketable? Are some used more than others in commercials?
Commercials, less often. In terms of the ones that I see getting asked for a lot, I actually have a list of 6, and it's Boston, New York, some kind of New York, and there's a lot that we could get into there. Something British, something Russian, and then the transatlantic accent is probably the most important. That's why it's the first one I teach in my class, because I was actually in a workshop with Andrea Toyas, and I asked her about, like, because I see mid-Atlantic, transatlantic. Are you asking for like old-timey radio guy? Because some people think that's like the transatlantic accent. Or are you talking about something that's a bit closer to Lord of the Rings? She goes, Lord of the Rings, always Lord of the Rings. If you're doing fantasy, Lord of the Rings. But when we hear like old-timey announcer and they say mid-Atlantic, they don't want you sounding like The Hobbit. So you gotta be able to know which one is which. How do I lean more American, transatlantic, mid-Atlantic? I make the distinction that one is one and one is the other, but I won't bore you with that.
I was just going to ask you, what is there a difference between the transatlantic and mid-Atlantic?
When I teach them, I make the distinction personally.
Mhm.
The phrases are interchangeable to everybody else. The idea for mid-Atlantic or transatlantic is that these are accents that formed on the ports of the East Coast in America because all of these British sailors would come and they would
Mhm.
have to do all this trading and, you know, business with Americans. And so it was this idea that we're going to come up with an accent that is halfway between. And then when we started broadcasting on the radio and television, we decided there's going to be a standardized American speech. This is how people should sound. So it's a great way to immediately go, I'm actually higher class than you are. You know, it's this real, and it's a very subtle thing, but it lets people know I was trained to
Mhm.
speak. On the other hand, like people bring up Cary Grant all the time,
Mhm.
not a transatlantic accent, but a British guy who got a lot of American roles when
Mhm.
he was speaking against people using the transatlantic accent.
Mhm.
So I'll be honest, it's probably the one that I use the most because it's this subliminal thing that goes,
Mhm.
it takes people into another world, whether that's old time, you know, classic radio voice or Frank Sinatra, kind of like that air of old world glamour. Or if it's fantasy, it's a really, really useful one for video games that gets asked for all the time.
I'm going to add on to that. What about global? So if you see something that says a global accent,
Right.
Yeah.
how do you approach that? What do you think of that?
It's funny.
Mm.
Because I've listened to like what gets cast as global, and it can mean anything, but it usually leans kind of European or Nordic, I would say.
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
I'm always like, do we go a bit more Swedish here? Are we going to do something that's very considered and like a little German? But ambiguity is actually on your side there. So if you are British and you push it a little African, or if you are American and you push it a little Nordic, if you're hard to place, but you sound elevated, it's
That's what
not
they
even
want.
about the region. It's the globe. It's an
Right.
accent from outer
You could be
space
from
looking
anywhere.
down. Yeah, but it's placeless more than it
Mhm.
is global.
That is a golden way to describe it right there. It's like you can't place it, but it's elevated. That's
Yeah.
exactly it.
Yeah,
And it's
that's
funny
what they
because when we
want.
get those specs, it's like, yeah, global. And then I'm always like, okay, but do you have a
Just
No,
look
no,
global
at big
no. I'm
things.
from
region? And it's
everywhere.
like,
I'm from
and
every place.
Yeah.
mo- most of the time they'll end up being like, well, let's shy away from whatever. They might like, let's not go German or French, or
Yeah.
whatever. Like they might say, like, let's stay away from those, but open to anything else, or
I'll
um,
throw this out too. Sometimes I've
yeah,
seen global, South African for what it's worth, because that's not one that we hear a lot
No.
in
yeah,
America.
But that's
yeah.
that reminds me, like, I'll see a lot on specs, they want an African accent.
Mhm.
It's like, well, Africa is a big continent. What does
True.
that mean?
True. Well, that's another thing is like, well, there's like the Pan-Hispanic accent, which is like, okay, maybe I don't know the difference between Nicaragua and Spain. Big difference. But there is something that sounds like somebody who started out speaking Spanish, who is now speaking English perfectly. That we get it's English with a hint of lime. It really is what it ends up being. It sounds like perfect English with
Just that little something.
Spanish pronunciations.
Mhm.
Same goes for African, and you can make the argument. I think generally where I take people, Zimbabwe,
Okay.
but you find anything Central is good, Congo is good, but have the basics of African because you can take those building blocks. Funny story, I met somebody who was Barbadian. I asked him, where are you from? He goes, I'm from Barbados. I go, you sound Irish. He goes,
Ah.
well, if you know your history. I go, oh wow, yeah. Everybody, and so there was that
Right.
whole thing about, if you say beer can in a British accent, you sound Jamaican, biakan. Like it sounds like you're saying bacon. But that's the story,
Right.
is like, and that's where the word Irie comes from. Like
Mhm.
if you understand, like, you take that African accent, you take that Irish accent, you mash them together, that's the story of that place.
Right.
Incredible to think of it from that perspective, and most people most people don't do that. They're just like, I'm just gonna put on this accent,
Yeah.
and we can hear when it's just, I'm gonna
I'm glad you
attempt
said
this
that.
accent,
I'm glad you
it's
said it.
like,
Yeah,
we can hear that it does not work.
totally.
Yeah. All right. And actually, that leads
It
us
kind of
into
leads into this one too. Yeah.
another. Yeah. So, question for Spanish accents. As a Dominican voice actor, I often see in auditions a neutral accent. What region is neutral considered? Would it be Mexican or Spain Spanish?
That's what we were talking about. That's that Pan-Hispanic accent.
Yep.
The pronunciations are going to be, and this is really the difference, is that different regions, they use the exact same language, but they hold their voice in a different part of the vocal tract. So it even happens in California, we're up north, everything is like very front of the mouth, and like, or in Venice, everything's kind of back here. Like it's every everywhere you go. New York, for instance, like everything's gonna be real jolly, or in the South, like you might start you get different faces even. The
Yes.
language and the way that people relate to each other is also how they're presenting themselves visually. And so that's actually where some of the sound comes from. In terms of being neutral, it's what would everybody understand?
And from the casting side, it's like, if you ever have a question about that, let us know. I would say 99% of the time it's Latin America.
Mhm.
So it's like, it's
Not
not even
Spain.
as specific as like Mexican, unless they're asking for Mexican. It's like just kind of that more generalized Latin American kind of sound.
Yeah, I mean, you always gotta consider the market.
Right. And
Seeing Susie's question.
she wants to put Andrew on the spot. Okay.
Oh, boy.
So Susie said, if you have time, I'd love to hear a paragraph of Sinatra, Cary Grant, various Rat Pack actors.
Well, Cary Grant, the thing what he would do is it's this very rubbery kind of thing. And there's even this sort of cadence that dips and scoops kind of like that. Totally different from Frank Sinatra, who has this very like full throaty voice and swagger. There's always that kind of swagger happening. So that's the difference between like a transatlantic and Cary Grant doing his thing. Is that a paragraph? No, but
That's
that's me
but
pulling
that's
that out.
amazing. Put you right on the spot. I didn't warn you that might
You
happen.
you gotta be ready. That's what
Gotta
it's
be
about.
ready.
Well, and I mean, that
The
is
accent man.
that's when you have that's when you've
Mhm.
become an expert at what you're doing. I mean,
Mhm.
and you're an expert. It's like you can pull those things out and find the authenticity. It's
Well,
incredible.
beyond that, I used to engineer. I've engineered for a lot of different places. One place I was really lucky to work for a while was Salami Studios,
Mhm.
and that's all animation. We were doing episodes of Scooby Doo, but back in the day, they did Powerpuff Girls, Johnny Bravo, and I think the pilot of Family Guy. It's kind of a legendary studio, but I would sit there taking notes on everybody that I watched. And we'd have people come in that were like, it was their first time there. You could tell they were very excited. Finally get to say the meddling kids line. That's a big deal. So, they do that. And like we'd even film them sometimes because that's a hallmark moment. Everybody wants that. But it's they'd finish the one character that they were brought in to do. And there would be 30 minutes left in the session. And if you're working a SAG job, you're getting paid the same for one character or three, up to three. They might have even gone up to four. But their script engines and directors would always go, all right, well, hey, we actually have this like one-off character here that like do you do other voices or accents? And I would see the blood drain from their face and get the deer in the headlights look, and they go, because you could tell like they just prepared that one thing and they did it perfectly. And you never know what people are going to throw at you, but
Mhm.
accents were always the first thing that came up. And I was amazed, like the people who just go, no, I don't. And they'd
Mm.
go, all right, well, try something. And then they'd try something and it sounded exactly the same. And off the talkback mic, they go, "We'll just get the next guy to do something." It broke my heart, but it let me know, like, it's the bare minimum. to
Mhm.
be able to do what you were there for and maybe 3 other things. You gotta be
Mhm.
prepared for all that kind of stuff.
And Marcia Goodman, who teaches our animation intensive, talks about the same kind of thing. They'll have you in the booth, you're doing a British accent. They'll be like, "Oh, yeah, that sounds great, but let's try it Polish."
Yep.
And you've got to be able to do that kind of thing.
So, well, Stacy's comment will kind of lead us into just talking about the class a little bit as well. So she said the accent class is phenomenal. I took the first one, it was like a year and a half ago. I kid you not, I still use the info, not just in VO, but like just hearing someone speak and in my mind being able to pinpoint the exact area they're from. So that's kind of cool. I mean, you've taught it in a way that, I mean, it's sticking with people. And like I've talked to a lot of people who have, been through your class, and it's like
Yeah,
I
everybody loves it.
hear them
Great.
raving about it all the time and how much they use it. And even like Stacy said, it's like not just in voiceover, I mean, a lot of them are actors, so they can use it on camera, on stage,
Mhm.
they can use it, wherever. But then also, yeah, just noticing, like taking note of what you're hearing, whether it's in real life or in a movie,
Yeah.
and starting to kind of pinpoint things, which is just fascinating. So
I'm
want to
glad to
talk a
hear it.
little bit. Yeah. Do you want
Yeah.
to talk a little bit about just like what you kind of do in the 6 weeks?
Sure. So I think one of the reasons why it sticks with people is because I'm really opposed to any form of like memorization. I don't think it's a good way of learning anything. I think thinking through things and understanding how things work gives you a better understanding of why you're doing what you're doing. So I give heuristics about, if it's this cold outside, you might do this. If it's this warm, that might change how you do this particular thing. Hot and cold. And I'll create visualizations for that. I'll create simplified versions of the map that go, okay, you're from this part. This is how they talk. And it's actually closer to this country. So you might get some of that. And I make it as simple as possible so that you're able to visualize, where am I? And, how sparse is it? Is it rural? Is it urban? And you, rather than thinking, I have a list of 75 accents that I can do, it's what's the terrain like? Who am I talking to? How have I grown up? How educated am I? Where you're really just doing the acting as opposed to what's the sound. However, it is structured as you learn at least 5 accents of your choice in 6 weeks. The first one, you don't get to choose because you got to learn the transatlantic accent. Because nobody in their right mind would choose that first, and you need to learn it. It used to be a prerequisite for actors generally, but
Mhm.
it's super useful. After that, week 2 is American regionalisms. So if you're from LA, do something on the East Coast or in the South, or vice versa. Figure out who else you can be from this country. Week 3 is the UK, and I include Ireland and Scotland and Wales, but anything British. And it sounds super vague, but you can get hyper specific. Which city, which part of the country. And whatever you work on, I'm there to tell you, like, research these things, watch these movies, get that kind of thing. And then by the time you come into class, let me tell you exactly what adjustments you can make and how you can sell this a little bit better and the character. Week 4 now, what I call the romance class, which is Spanish, French, and Italian romance languages. And that's the first week that you get into accents of people who are speaking English as a second language, because that's a whole other perspective to consider.
Sure.
Week 5, most people, 5 and 6, you get to choose. Most people use 5 for Russian or German, but wherever you want to go, you're welcome to go. Week 6, again, your choice. You let me know what you want to work on. I'll do my research. You do your research. We'll come back and we'll convene. We'll leave with something workable. But I always finish it off with a discussion about affectations and about how accents change over time, which is another thing that people don't consider all that often.
Mm.
Is that, like, standard American used to be transatlantic, but now it's kind of what they call Gen Am, General American, which is somewhere in the middle of Nevada, California, and Texas. So, it's we're language as language evolves, as culture evolves, accents are changing constantly.
That's awesome.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, it's like a tour around the world.
Very much
I-
through time and space.
yeah. And Jeff said that's like 50 dialects in week 3 alone. Yeah. I mean, because there are, I mean, as you said earlier, there it's it's endless.
Well,
It's
bottom line, if you're taking this, it's because you want to consider what's going to get you more work. What can you
Mhm.
reasonably portray,
yeah.
and if that's on camera, take an honest look at yourself and go, I could
Mhm.
pass for something if I did this. If I were able to really hone in on this accent and maybe the physicality and understand the culture of all that. But what's going to work for your career? What's going to get you some more jobs?
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. And
awesome.
I also love, and I mean, this is one of the things that when we first spoke about, the class several years ago now, and then what I've been hearing from people is that it's incredible that you allow people to choose. It's not like you're picking six very specific dialects or
Yeah.
and you're like, these are the things that you have to learn. It's like if people feel like, okay, I have this one, maybe I'm going to try this one. I'm going to challenge myself. Or I feel like I have this one, but maybe it's not as
And
authentic as I want it to
frankly,
be. I'm going to work on that.
if somebody comes in, they go, and this has happened where they go, I really want to do, because there are a couple accents that are like pairs, and they're cousins, and I just know the way that some high school band teachers can look at your lips and go trumpet, saxophone, and and that determines the rest of your life. I can hear what you're going for, and I go, you're not an Irishman, you're a Scotsman, and I
Mm.
know because you're flipping toward the back of your mouth. Or what are the other ones? German Austrian is another one.
Mhm.
But like you can hear, and if I hear that like you're going for this but your natural tendency is to do the opposite, I go, why are we forcing a fit? Do the one that's natural. That's going to be a lot easier for you. So
Yeah.
I want it to be a class where people, yeah, I want them to squeeze as much value as they can out of it.
Mhm.
I don't want to keep you here coming back for level 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and be like, just, but it's really about how can you make yourself versatile with everything you've already got.
It's so incredible to hear you talk about it too, because it's just, I mean, so often accents just get looked at as like, oh, I'm just
Hack.
gonna do this
Yeah.
accent. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's like there is so much more to it. And yeah, just the believability and applying
Mhm.
it to so many different areas. It's not just for voiceover,
Yeah,
it's
learning the
like
history behind it, the utility of it, like
Yeah.
that's
incredible.
awesome.
Yeah, it's
Sure.
amazing.
And I gotta
Um,
tell you also, like, it's amazing to be able to do it at the Voicecaster. Like, I love that was where I took my first voiceover steps, and, like, it's it's such a friendly environment. I love being able to have people in the room getting silly, trying things out, and, people wanna learn is what I'm
mhm,
finding, and
yeah.
I try to make it a fun place to experiment, and I let everybody know, like, you guys can criticize each other, because if somebody in the room is cringing because you aren't doing a good job, I would much rather have you know that than you walk out and be like, "I guess I can do everything," and then totally destroy your career. No, I wanna be honest with you.
Yeah, yeah. And that again, back to the in person is just it's amazing. And we try to create a safe, fun environment here in all of our classes because I think that's the way to learn.
Mhm.
It's like you don't want
Yeah.
to walk into a class and be nervous. It's like, no, everybody's
You're
in
here
the
to
same
learn and have
boat.
fun.
Yeah.
We're all, challenging. It's have some fun with it. Have some fun
Yeah.
with that
If you
learning.
can't have fun doing accents, what can you have fun with?
Right?
Right? So even those of you out there who are intimidated by it, this is a great way to approach it because
Mhm.
it's not just Andrew throwing you in there saying, "Okay, now do this accent and now do this accent." You're going to genuinely learn it and learn about it in ways that you haven't before. I don't know of
Yeah.
anybody who teaches anything like this, which
Yeah.
is pretty amazing.
It's a 6-week class.
Mhm.
Yep. Here at the Voicecaster in Burbank. Let us know if you're interested. If you have any other questions, obviously reach out. We can answer anything, whether it's us or, we'll chat with Andrew, get any details that you need. Obviously, if you're watching the replay of this, you can feel free to drop any questions as well. And we keep an eye on social media and everything as well. So all right. Anything else to add, Andrew, before we sign off?
I think we covered a lot of it.
Awesome.
No, that's great. Thank you guys so much. This is really
Thank you
Yeah.
fun.
so
It's
much
been a
for
fascinating
joining
conversation. Thank you
us.
so much.
Yeah, even I learned a lot of things. I love it. I love it. Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrew.
Thank you guys. I'll talk to you.
Thanks. We'll see you soon.
Catch our next VoiceOver Casting Corner episode live on Facebook and YouTube. Check our socials or follow us for the latest info. Thanks for listening.